telling me I was a clap for you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think I might not need this. My voice is okay. We need it right. You need it right. My voice carries, so anybody can have it. Yeah, thank you again, once again. Let's begin, and as we start, the rest who are in the other halls who are interested in this can join us as they come. Gaming, very interesting. I would say this when we were designing the content of this event and we thought about gaming. There was this little debate about, okay, what would the topic be? What would we say the different gaming, blah blah blah, different ideas were coming. And I just thought, just call it gaming. If you say gaming, when we get there, we know what the conversation is going to be. Since we want to be as expansive in dialogue as possible, we don't want to put boundaries around what should be talked about. We're talking about gaming right now and gaming in the coming years. Yesterday we had a session on VFX and it was so mind-blowing. The guy's talking about what is coming, the next thing that is coming on VFX, and it lets me know that this technology thing and content is so ever-changing. So today we're going to be talking about the changes that are happening and how it's affecting the industry. I'm going to start with Benedict, who has a keen attention in the developments and training space of this. To begin, tell us what you think where the industry is right now. When I say the industry, let's can we narrow it down to the creators, the creating part of it. Where is it right now, and what are the exciting things going on?
Thank you very much, Ray. You mentioned creators, and it's something very similar. That is what is happening globally. Hello, can everybody hear me? I don't think that's it. Can you hear me at the back?
Yeah.
All right. So when you talk about creators, you talk about gaming, right? Gaming is very, very unique because it seems to cut across every other thing.
Yeah.
Right? It cuts across film, it cuts across animation, it cuts across VR, virtual reality as well. It also cuts across many other things that we don't even anticipate to gaming, right? For instance, some of the fintech technologies you see, cardless transactions and those kind of things, actually had a beginning in gaming where you had economies, right? Gaming economies, and you had to actually buy assets, right? And those assets were actually being sold on things that maybe you have actually gained in a gaming system, right? So when you talk about those kind of the creator economics, you're thinking about the metaverse today. There's a lot of topic and content around what the metaverse is, where it should be, what's going to do in the future, right? And again, with the metaverse, you're talking about basically NFTs, people creating communities, people creating social discussions, right, based on their games. Now, these games generally have to have the general core dynamics. You have to have a great, exciting content. You have to have a great gameplay, right? Those are the basics. You have to have things that attract people to play your games. But the social dynamics, which is also a key part of the metaverse, right, is also there, right? So the social, the economies, the tokenization as well of digital assets, the goods and services. The basic thing that is, the basic example I can give of tokenization is, let's say, everybody knows so there's a model, right, in the mobile gaming system called gaming as a service.
Yeah.
Basically what that means is that you have a game, which is actually operating on a free model, right? You download the game on the App Store, you don't pay anything. But as you play the game, you are meant to pay, right? So the play to is like play to earn or play to play, right? Pay to play. Yeah, so those things that you buy, right, are you like always attached to your progress in the game and that sort of thing. So if you take those kind of digital goods and you now look at what the metaverse is doing today, then you're now thinking about things like NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens, which also works similar on the blockchain as well. We choose safe contracts, giving and that sort of thing. So generally, we're heading towards a place where there's more democratization in terms of creating content. There's more democratization in terms of creating, merging that content with what's happening in the financial systems and seeing how that can play into the future. So it's still a conversation that has started, but it's growing. And that's what I love about the gaming industry. Everything seems to grow.
Yeah, and the flux, I mean, the rate of growth seems overwhelming. I mean, recently, you mentioned NFT.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard of NFT, and I just Googled, what is this NFT? I Googled NFT. The very first search results I saw was already linking it to gaming and in-app purchases, and I'm like, okay, I thought this NFT should be something very far. Why is it talking about gaming? And I want to ask you, Mr. Obi, the recent this NFT trend going on. Have you in Malio games played around it so far? And if you have, what has been the experience been?
Yeah, so obviously you're seeing a lot of like evolving trends and new opportunities within the existing space. I personally don't tend to ride such waves. I think that sometimes they are short-term opportunities. Some of them do have long-term opportunities. You know, NFTs are linked to like cryptocurrencies, which are linked to like the metaverse. There's a lot of like interconnectedness for some of these technologies. But then, you know, the question is like, you know, what is the underlying driver? What is the underlying motivation for some of those features or services? And is it just a bubble? Is it just, you know, excitement for excitement's sake? Not saying that there isn't opportunities there, but sometimes it causes distraction. And I think that the focus for us has been around developing the industry. For you to develop the industry, you have to obviously have very strong monetization. We're seeing strong monetization in music. We're seeing strong monetization in movies. I don't know about animation. I don't know if we're seeing strong monetization in animation just yet.
Not that great, yeah.
But there you go. But we know that it's a very lucrative global industry, right? So there should be strong monetization, and there should be focus around that kind of like, you know, the core services and businesses or products that can deliver that kind of like strong monetization. Obviously, you need content as the driver for that. So you need quality content that's accessible. You know, whether you're monetizing locally, you're monetizing internationally. You know, that is obviously the beauty of the space that we operate within, is that we're not limited by geography. And then obviously you have the challenge around how do you get the right product, which is driven by, you know, creative individuals and that crossover between, you know, technically competent individuals and people who have artistic creativity coming together, working together to create content that can then be monetized. You know, gaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, multi-billion-dollar industry globally across multiple geographies. It creates incredible amount of jobs. Every single person we know plays games in one form or the other. So it's not a question. You know, games are consumed the same way music is consumed. You know, I bet you Hitler played games, you know, like at some point in his life. So it's a product that can be monetized, whether you're monetizing via ads, whether you're monetizing via in-app purchases, whether you're monetizing via building NFTs or, you know, like digital currencies. The core service is that, you know, you have high user engagement and you're able to convert some of those engagements into monetization. And I think that science is what's missing, and that is kind of like the work that we're doing now, so that as people come through into the industry, they're not just coming through as creators, but they're coming through as product developers who are delivering that product to a market that is willing to consume and pay for it.
Interesting. I'm going to get back to you on that last bit sentence you made about people coming through and creating products. But let me talk to this Oga here, Mr. Uchichukwu. I see your stuff, the Oche, yeah, and nice design. admitting the level of where would you say we are as in the Nigerian gaming space with like the design aspects of it, the look, the environment. Would you say we are actually competitive with global standards, or is it there?
I would say to create a good game is possible. It's just that for my case, I was kind of checking the cost because on the creative guys, the creative artists, to the artists. Because for me, I wanted my 2D art to be better than what I could do personally. I can do the 2D art, but not as good as personally. I got to get it done. So we have people that are really good that can give you the look and feel you want. Just if on the business sense, if you feel that by the time you're done with the game, and will you be able to cover the cost of getting to setting up the team and everything. So for me, the game I'm working on is as a hobby. I'm just trying to feel out the business to the sector to know how it's how the feedback would be, how the sector would react to the game of that quality. So that's why it took a while to get here. And initially, the aim was to create something bigger, but as I understood the whole process, I was like, it's better to make something automobile. Yeah, what's that? Because almost everyone has a phone.
Yeah.
And the money to get money from mobile games is a bit easier than paying for cases. So after just checking the cost and everything, in games, like I checked recently, just about 5% of games are profitable. I think it's an old start. I kind of don't know the center. So that's yeah. So that is how the gaming sector is. So I just try to do what I can, get the quality as good as possible, and I'm proud of what I've created so far.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah, because it's because of the quality I wanted to get. I needed to take more time to get it, but now since I've done this, if I'm to create a next one, we'll be faster. Because this was an idea that began like probably 5 to 7 years ago. I'm just getting it done now. So it's just a goal.
That's interesting. Now we're back to the question I mentioned earlier, and it's about you. Malio is a game publishing company, right? So, and because I got really interested when you mentioned about when people come into the sector, they should be creating a product, and because you're working on something that gives like a platform for them to come in. Now, how do you deal with people who come to say, oh, you guys, I love you guys, what you guys are doing. I have this gaming story or idea, and do you say, okay, do you publish them, and how does it work for you guys?
So anybody who's built games knows that game development goes through multiple stages. So obviously you have the idea, and that idea needs to go through some form of ideation to make it into a game. So a story is not a game. A story is a story. A game is centered around the core game mechanic.
Yeah.
Like the core gameplay loop, the player progression, the progression systems. What is the player doing there? So if you're doing like a first-person shooter, for instance, and first-person shooters tend to be very, very, very popular. Like, why am I shooting? What is the end goal? How long is this shooting going to last for? What is the duration of your actual game itself? Is it a 2-hour game? Is it an endless game? and then how much resources would be required for you to build a game that would require 10 hours of playtime, as an example. You know, how many worlds would exist, how many characters, you know, like what are the strengths of those characters, how do you balance the game in terms of giving you the weaponry and then making it easy or difficult for you to kill, and then all the twists and turns that come in between. So the ideation is the very first part. Then you start doing the documentation, which goes really into great details around those kind of like mechanic systems, the features that the game would have. Is this a multiplayer game versus a single player game? What are the gameplay modes? What are the different challenges with the different gameplay modes? You know, what are the assets that are available? Do you have characters? Quite a lot of decisions needs to be made. And again, like you now start talking about like the in-game economy. Would you have an in-game economy? What is the monetization strategy for that game itself? Because it's not every single game that has in-game economy that requires like in-app purchases. Because some games you have to grind through to be able to acquire the items that you need. So it just requires a lot more grinding than other games where you can actually buy those assets and then just play through. And then once you're done with all of that, you then go into you know, what is called a gray box prototype, which is essentially a very light version of your core gameplay loop, so that you can actually see if the game itself is fun. Because, you know, Richard mentioned how long it possibly took him and his team. You can spend 2, 3, 4 years developing a game, refining it, going through multiple stages of development, and the game still doesn't make sense, right? So you can either do that, or you can spend maybe 6 to 7 weeks just focusing on that core gameplay mechanic, getting it tested, getting user feedback, and understand if the game in itself works before you start investing in it. So for us, what we're thinking about is, you know, like, we have people who are passionate, who are passionate about gaming. They see it as a business opportunity, not just an opportunity to create, but an opportunity to actually monetize their creation. And that obviously is legitimate, because yes, the stats might appear that only 5% of games make profit. However, profit is a questionable term, because, you know, you can generate, you have games that are doing hundreds of millions or tens of millions in revenue, but are not profitable because of the cost base, the cost of building, the cost of support, right? And the fact that they are possibly a huge IP. So there are other factors that impact that. But the key thing here is that every single game has the potential to monetize, especially if you're able to acquire users into your game. So there are people who are passionate about that. There are people who have the skills, either creative or technical. And even within the creative skills, you know, that includes people who are writers, you know, people who are artists, animators, you know, like musicians. They all factor in, and they have this idea that they can actually communicate and articulate. Putting that together into a game is still not a business. You know, like, as again Richard mentioned, like, you know, these are multiple hurdles that you have to go through. So you understand the very first one, you complete it. You understand the second one, you complete it. You understand the third one, you complete it. Very much like a video game, actually. You know, every single new level, everything is different. So now you're figuring it out. You know, all of the skills that you learned the last time is great, but it doesn't really help you this new level now. Now you need to figure out what the space looks like and the skills you require. And it's a little bit tougher, and sometimes you stop and you go away, you do something else, and then you come back and you say, you know what, I need to really play this game, right? So it's that kind of like progression. And because we have a lot of experience, we can actually support some of these creators with, you know, like, especially on the business side, on the publishing side, on the user acquisition side, and even in terms of like just like basic like fine-tuning and balancing. I mean, like, we are investing incredibly. We're investing a lot more now in like just game design, which has nothing to do with coding, has nothing to do with art. It just literally has everything to do with like the systems of the game. So we're investing a little bit more on that now, and that will enable us to take any basic game and design systems that essentially ensures that the player has high retention and possibly high conversion from a monetization standpoint.
Interesting.
So if I can add to that, I think the first decision everybody has to take if you want to build a game is actually what sort of game you really want to build, and also what sort of platform you really want to focus on. when that key decision is done, and the platforms are there, mobile, PC, web, or console. Once that key decision is done, then you now start looking at if for console games and for PC games, I think your lifetime of development, your lifetime in terms of development is longer than if you're on mobile games, and also your decision making it's a little bit they're a little bit more. I won't say more complicated if you're building console games, but a lot of things have to start from a business decision before you start thinking about creating characters and that sort of thing, because you actually have to go and pitch to the publishers. Once you pitch to the publishers and you pitch to the venture capitalists, whoever is interested, and also that goes back into the models you decide to use in your game, right? For things like games as a service, right, those are more tuned into what venture capitalists want to back, rather than say if you wanted to sell your game on a unit sale, that means you do your CD and you put it up on a digital store, or you sell it physically, right? So those are dynamics. But once you set out on deciding what kind of game you're building, right? Then the challenges of your development cycle, the challenges of your team development, you solve along, right? But everything has to have a business case, because if you're building a product, right? You're building a product. You're not building.
What I'm getting from both of you is like gaming is just 10% creativity. It's more business, more.
No, not really. So I've got a different perspective here. So first of all, is when I talk about gaming, I talk about mobile. So for me, my platform is not the conversation. I don't think about PC. I don't think about console or web. It's just mobile. So when I speak about gaming, I'm speaking specific about mobile, and I should have made that clear from the start. So there's never an argument around platform for me. The point you made around if somebody has an idea, if they are pitching me a PC idea, I wouldn't even entertain it. Like it's a non-starter, right? So I would say if it's for mobile, then we can talk. So that's the very first thing. My approach towards creation and my advice to anybody who wants to create is build something that you or somebody around you would want to play. Build for your mom, build for your sister, build for your cousin, build for your friends, build for your church. Like, don't go and build a game that somebody in the world somewhere might want to. Build for your schoolmates, build for your co-workers. Like, build a game that you have somebody, Eniola or George or like Beatrice would play this game, right? And when you build it, this affects your game design decisions. This affects your player characters. This affects the scope of your game, right? This even affects the monetization, because if you're going to be pricing your items at like $20 or $30, would Eniola pay for that? No, she wouldn't. So you're thinking about her and thinking about what she wants in a game, and then build small. Don't start a project that is going to take you like a project that would require like a team of 10. The skill sets that you have. You're an artist, right? If you're doing 2D art, then do a 2D game. Don't do a 3D game if you have the skill sets for 2D, right? If you're a developer, and your developer has experience with 3D, you can get free objects online. So you can develop a game without any dependencies. Our approach is that we have small teams of people who develop small prototypes. We built and launched a game called Russell. It's a road platformer game with 15 levels. It's a full game. It has pretty much 90% of the features required, but it only has 15 levels. You will finish the game in 3 minutes, or maybe like 5 minutes, right? But we didn't develop that game as a blockbuster. We built it as a basic prototype, right? To be able to communicate to a third party what our technical competence was. We built it within a short space of time. It took us about 3 weeks to get it done, right? But that was a product that was built by one person whilst working on a major project. So this was like a side gig for that individual, right? But in terms of just the core game experience, you can pass that game to Eniola or to George or to your mom, and she will get it and she will play it and she will enjoy it, and then you get the feedback. Do you like it, right? Should I add more levels? And she will say, yes, I want more levels, add more. And then you can then start investing the time to add 50, 100, 500 levels. But don't start building a game with 500 levels in mind. Don't do that. It will take too much time, too much resources, too much technical requirements.
That's a lot of levels.
Yeah.
How many years will it take to finish it?
I some games have, like they're large.
Well, for mine, I'm a 3D artist, I'm an architect, so it took me that long because I didn't computer engineering, which is coding, computer engineering. So most of the time I spent was using UE4. I kind of also used it.
How many levels did the game have?
No,
Tell us about your game for starters. I don't even know what the game is.
Okay, it is a first person shooter. It's a first person shooter, but also I kind of control the ammo so that you don't always have to shoot what's in front of you. It also has a feel of tempo and in which you have to move, weave through stuff, but you can also shoot. So in order to prevent from just shooting, the ammo is limited. So if you don't complete the task as fast as possible, the thing gets faster. So it becomes more difficult as you get. So the levels are based on being able to complete the task that is listed. So in a way, I set it to, the levels are set to, I did it in a way that the values keep increasing. So it depends on the set to infinity.
Okay.
So yeah, level set to infinity.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it's
Definitely.
the way it was coded was that the values, the targets keep increasing as it goes. So the thing never ends. It depends on how good you are. So that's why initially in the beginning, it was made to be as easy as possible. So within the early stages, you use that to understand. Yeah, you use it to understand the way it works.
Yeah.
Not that when, like most games like the Temple or Endless or Subway Surfer. Sometimes when you start, you can barely pass the first.
Yeah, I never played that game because the very first time I tried.
Yeah, you barely pass it. So initially, there were some games I played I could barely pass the first or three.
Yeah.
And the idea is to make people play the game as long as possible, especially if you want to do ads.
Yeah.
Because the more they play, the more they click the ads, and the more that they want to. So I got the concept from Candy Crush. The Candy Crush concept is just to make you play.
Yeah.
Just keep playing.
Just keep playing. It is not the levels like that. I believe levels also in Candy Crush is too. Infinity. They kind of just change the values.
Benedict, in what you do, I remember at Lagos Comic Con, you had a lot of guys around your stand, and it got me even getting to understand a lot about this gaming thing because, like, interested in it. I want to ask you. You do trainings, right? And I understand with the way this industry moves, you can't do training for where the industry is. You have to do training for where the industry is going. Yeah. So now, where would you see from your curriculum, from your stuff you do, where would you see the industry is going?
Wow, that's a great question. So currently, if you're talking about the African market, right? I'm going to try and answer it from two perspectives: the global market and the African market, right? Our first point of concern is the African market, is the Nigerian market per se, right? What we try and do to satisfy the demand in terms of talent development is to offer the basic skill sets, right, that everybody will need to become a game developer, to get started, right? So that is more about technical trainings, right? Knowing the game engines you're going to use, whether you're using Unreal, whether you're using Unity, and maybe there are some other ones outside of it, the ones that stay at the linear, the basic ones. So that is done. Then after that is being delivered, we try and influence each student by bringing in global perspectives, right, in terms of building that same basic skill, right? When I mean global perspective, where the market is going, right? What they should think about in terms of designing the game, right? What they should think about in terms of putting a community beside around their game to make their game successful, right? So all that is like the very set of training that is done. Then on a global scale, we have to actually match what is actually being, what is actually being delivered. And that is more about having things like cutting edge technologies, right, that you use, right? Which is why we picked Unreal Engine as a great platform for us, because that plays Unreal Engine, if anybody is very familiar with them, they have been able to move into going from game engine, right, to acquiring content that helps them tell stories in filmmaking, acquiring other people, other companies, organizations to help them develop content in terms of art, in terms of animation, right, even in terms of architecture, right? So it fits into the pipeline of gaming, animation, VFX, motion media, motion capture. So, and also, because on the global space, there is always, there's that synergy that we always know, how games can play into animation, how animation can play into VFX, how VFX can play into movies, and all that. So we're always trying to infuse and if anybody has seen any of our content, right, that we have on YouTube, through Creative Pixel Academy, you can find us on. We try and bring many people who have this diverse experience and get their own insight, right, to how they started, how they are going, how best they see they can help people grow, and give those advice, right, that we don't have down here because of how young our industry is.
Very high.
Exactly. So that's what we try to do, really, and that's how our story happens.
I'm going to allow some questions from the audience and see if after that I still have time to ask one last question myself. So do we have a question out there? Audience question? Okay.
Okay, I don't know whether you've asked this question already, but I don't know, right now there seems to be a boom in terms of the competitions and all that for games and all that. But in terms of the creation parts, there's really nothing much really happening there in that space. So I don't know who the question is for, but what are you guys doing in the space, the gaming space now, to be able to engage more people to actually make games, and also going forward provide job opportunities for animators as well? Hope the question was clear.
Yeah.
Let me take a stab at that. When you refer to competitions, are you talking about esports or general?
Yeah, esports. Yeah.
Esports. Right. So the conversation for competition like esports and also just gaming in general. For competitions to happen, you have to have an engaging content, which goes back to the question of content, right? For you to have an engaging content, that means you have a community who's interested in your game. That means you've done the basic things. You've created the great gameplay. You have the things that will actually attract them to come. Now, whether you're building on the mobile or you're building on console, right? The basic things still needs to be there. Whether that means you have engaging gameplay, and you have that community, you have that social discourse. It's like your game is the next best drug in town, right? Now, once those are in place, then marketing it, right? And if you see what's happening globally, is that once, for instance, Call of Duty, right? We know the Call of Duty is a simple war story. The same, people go to war, you control a soldier in a unit and that sort of thing, right? But there's a great social dynamic to Call of Duty in terms of getting music artists, people like Snoop, to come to competitions, right? To generate community engagement, right? With people, with fans of Call of Duty, right? They've done it with Snoop, they've done it with 2 or 3 or 4 other people, 4 musicians.
It's like you don't understand my question. You're not answering my
Like
question.
let me
Maybe
rephrase.
Hugo can try, right?
I'm still coming back to what we are doing locally.
No, okay.
Right.
I think what he asked was why the whole frenzy about esports competitions and winning is going on. That's
All right.
What is what is it just doing about engaging creators, animators, and creating new games and engaging people who create newer games? Like, because it seems like there is so much about established games and we are playing Call of Duty, we are playing that. Like, what is the gaming industry? Game publishers still looking out for newer games, creating other games that can engage more people to work.
Let me come in here. It's actually a very good question because I had the same issue around the popularity of esports. So like Africa as the consumer of games rather than the producer of games. So 2 years ago we launched our training curriculum. We have a lot of experience building games in mobile. This year we rolled that out to 500 learners across 3 countries. So we actually just completed it this week, where we trained around 300 game developers in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria. And the idea behind that program is to kind of like build these foundational skills required to build content. For you to have successful content, you need talent. And the industry doesn't have a structure for producing talent. And unlike industries like even music has moved on, movies have moved on, but like, you know, like nobody's going to cater to this space unless we who are the practitioners design something for us. And this was the inspiration behind the thinking for Game of Africa to design a structured curriculum that is designed by industry for producing high volumes of content for the marketplace. And in the coming years, our ambition would be to support content creators by giving them this kind of like structured environment where they wish to produce. We're not just going to be doing the training. We have very strong ambitions to build game developer hubs across the continent, which are physical spaces that have physical infrastructure that supports content development. You know, like we want to be a publisher of content within the continent again. So our ambition has to go beyond just the shores of Nigeria and just take over the whole continent. Or at least like try to be present in every single place, because there is a common thread that connects all of us. And the talent and the skill. So what makes gaming very unique, unlike other segments of tech, so if you look at places like fintech, agri-tech, you know, e-commerce, the infrastructure requirements, the regulatory requirements to operate in multiple geographies is a lot more complicated than for us. So it's a little bit easier for us to have people work in different parts of the country and have our games being distributed in different parts of the continent without having to be geographically present in those places. So I think that this is the first step. You know, like we completed our program. Through that program, we were able to release around 13 new games. These are 13 diverse games, like really, really diverse. We had a game that tackled mental health, using a platformer to create immersion. We had a flight simulation game, which is like really mind-blowing for a first-time game developer who just went through 5 months of training to build a full flight simulation in 3D. We had a puzzle game that was built around Africa and sort of like wildlife in Africa, and demonstrates knowledge and has this kind of like animated animals in the background, and based on the answers that you get, the animals will either live or die. And these are people who have never built games before. These are people who are like newbies to Unity, working as teams to come up with this idea. So the potential is there. It's just that the access hasn't been there in the past. And through the Game of Africa Bootcamp program, we will provide access to over 10,000 people in the next 5 years. And through that, hopefully, we will then start to see, because before we can build Call of Duty, before we can build those games, we really have to build the simple ones first, and like build mastery by doing the simple ones. And then once we've build that experience, then we can then take more ambitious projects.
Sorry, does that answer your question?
Huh?
Does that answer your question?
Beautifully, the answer.
Okay, good.
Because our next speaker is not around, so I think we can still continue. Let me ask Uche. Let me ask Uche. I know this is your first foray into gaming.
Yeah.
Can you just speak a little bit on your challenges so far to encourage anyone who is also trying to go into their first game?
You should maybe just talk a little bit about your background before. Yeah.
Okay, so
Was it part of your?
No. I wish.
okay, so I am an architect by profession, so I do 3Ds and animations for presentations. So normally I'm kind of into, as in, gaming is divided into the art and the coding. So I am from the art background. So to do the game, I had to learn how to code. So in a way, in terms of presentation, the coding would also help me in my own presentations in art. So I was like, let me use it first to make money in my art stuff. So I created apps related to architecture and presentations. So it was now during my free time I used to work on the game, trying to solve the challenges that involved in creating the game. So that's the main reason why it took that long. So I learned Unreal Engine. The reason why I use Unreal because for Arcade, in terms of the presentation, it was more realistic in terms of the presentation, the 3Ds, how the images look like and everything. The word is graphics was better than Unity, if they ask me. So I wanted to use a game engine that I could use for my architecture and I could use for my gaming. So I have created apps in Unreal. I've also done VR in Unreal, and so this is like the sort stuff I could use the game engine to do. So my challenges so far has been, initially when I wanted to create the game, I met a game developer who was busy, and so at a point it became clear that if the game was going to be created, I have to learn to code myself. So that I had to accept. Initially, some years ago, Benedict on Facebook, we used to talk, we used to chat. So to me, I'm a fan of, you should try to learn as much as you can, because waiting for someone, you most likely get this. You most likely be unable to get it done. So I feel you should try to understand what you can do and try to create stuff based on what you feel you can create. So that is what I just sat down and tried to understand. Within this period, what can I get done and what are the advantages and what can I do? So that's how I went from a big game from Call of Duty to down to the
basic you can
to the basic stuff I can get done.
And it's a mobile game.
It's a mobile game, and
He loves great architecture stuff and everything.
Yeah.
I've seen some of his work and it's crazy.
I've seen them.
It's just
Yeah, it's a person.
So please, I use Unreal Engine as well. So
Okay.
I want to just ask, I'm an artist, create the environment and all, environment development. So, but I also do level design. There's small coding with the blueprint. Which is better, blueprinting or C++ coding with only
I use blueprints.
Blueprint?
I use blueprints.
Okay, good. I think I'm on the right track. Thank you.
But it helps. It helps if you have some basic C++. Blueprints makes it easy, right? Blueprints makes a lot of things easy, right? Where it becomes difficult is if you're building more big network system that, exactly, that blueprints might not be able to handle. You need to actually write the code. But as it is, as the current state of Unreal Engine today, you're building a game, you want to put it to commercial. Blueprint is your best.
Thank you.
Okay. The guy at the back.
Definitely.
Okay.
I have like inside information for everything. I just have like 3 questions for people. So the first one is, has any of your games been profitable? I don't know if I can hear. So I have 3 questions for people. Right. So the first question is that, has any of your games has it been profitable? Any of them? Any mobile one? I don't know what I can give inside.
Yeah, 3 questions.
Yeah. So the first, I should ask all the questions. Okay, fine. So the first one is, has any of your games been profitable? Second one is, you mentioned your team were investing in design. However, could you give more information regarding that? Is it like paper design, or are they like building systems that can be easily replicatable in other games, so that it makes it just easy to just churn out games and churn out games that have nice retention? And the third one is like, what advice would you give to any new person who wants to run a new mobile game studio? So say you don't do PC, but mobile game studio.
Cool. Thanks, Shan. So in terms of profit, again, profit is subjective. I don't think we've had any game that is like a blockbuster. Otherwise, I'll probably be doing this call via Zoom. Some really nice. But obviously, it's a gradual step, right? So we're really focusing on sort of like the user acquisition, the retention data, and then like building more progression systems. So we still have a lot of work to do from our content standpoint. The average length of play time is still very small, and we need to figure out ways to like increase that. And the only way you can do that is by adding even more like different options, like multiple different gameplay modes, ensuring doing live ops, for instance. We can't support that at this moment in time. But I think we'll get there eventually. My hope is that maybe next year. We're hoping to release that for Racer this year and have it as a hit. But that's still in development, unfortunately. But it's just, you just keep pushing.
It's a journey.
It's just non-stop, right? But the good thing is that we have very strong foundational skills on the technical side, which is why we're investing a lot more now on the design side. So talk a little bit more about that. So our thinking is this: we've been able to put the reason why you worked with us on the curriculum, so you know how this came about. The reason for that was kind of like do something structured, because everybody comes at this from different directions, and everybody exits at different points. So with something structured, you only take the people that make it to the final bus stop. Like that's just the requirement. So what we did with the program this time around was we took everyone through the 9-week training program, and they all finished the content. They went through 1 month of mentoring and masterclasses, and then they delivered a game. They had to deliver a game, and all of those games are going to be published. They're actually going through, all of them have been published now, we're just waiting for the approvals. And a lot of game developers actually never publish. These are people who build games 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Can I see your game? It's not on the store. Like, if you are not published, you're not a game developer. Yeah. That's my definition. A game developer is somebody who has published a game, right? If you are an aspiring game developer, then you're an aspiring game developer. And people have a lot of skills, right? But they don't trust themselves enough. Which is why, when we were going through the program, and I remember the last phases of it where we were giving a lot of feedback, it was really trying to explain to them that your game doesn't have to have 100 levels. We published a game with 5 levels, or 15 levels that you could finish in 5 minutes, and we are a studio, right? So there's nothing wrong with you publishing a game with just a single level, right? And when someone asks you about it, you just send them a link. They go to the App Store, they download the game, they play it, and then they tell you they want more, right? Which is the feedback that you design. That's what makes you continue developing it, right? You can build 10 different games with just single levels, and you say, that the approach that you're taking is to do diverse portfolios, right? Multiple genres in terms of making decisions on what to build. A platformer, first-person shooter, racer, puzzle, right? You can do every single one of them and then watch the data. And then based on the data that you get, you can then decide on which one you want to double down on which one is much more effective for you to do. So from a design standpoint, I think it's more around the systems, and this is actually linked to this point that you make around systems, right? We should be able to have, as a studio, we should be able to have retention systems in our back pockets, engagement systems, monetization systems, right? And these are systems that go on top of a game. So one job of designing a game is actually coding it, doing the design, doing all that hard work, right? But that has nothing to do with user engagement. It has nothing to do with player retention. It has nothing to do with game monetization. Those are completely different things that you now come across. It does have nothing to do with user acquisition, right? So these are now completely separate challenges that you come across once you are done developing your game. But by then, you're pretty much burnt out. You have no energy left, right? You have no resources left. And then you're now facing all of these, with the analogy I gave about playing games, you're not going to this new level and the rules are now completely different. And you're like, yeah, I'm not going to play this anymore. So as a studio, we can afford to invest the resource in designing those systems so that our developers don't spend and waste energy on them. And how you optimize, so most large game studios will probably have a 40% production team, and the other 60% is admin, marketing, a whole bunch of data analysts, data scientists that are looking at the data, crunching the data, and just making tweaks. And that is what those systems are about. Those systems is how you monetize. There are shitty games or games that you think that are average that are milking it on the App Store. There are replica games that are making it on the App Store, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue every single week in, week out, right? It's those systems that enable them to do that, right? And this is the science of gaming. This goes beyond just, I want to build a game or I have a game idea. It's way beyond that. And that is where the investment is going to go.
Quite interesting. We'll take one last question.
Last question, the advice you give,
Okay, the advice you give.
No, they all give advice at the end of my question, I have two questions. One is a personal question, one is just a general question. So let me ask the general question first. There was a gaming studio in this country, I think it was called Kuluya. And Kuluya was really doing all these things you mentioned. They had the staff strength, they had loads of published games and all that. But suddenly they just collapsed and the company just transformed something else, and that was the end. I don't know who amongst you can speak to that. Maybe you have an insider on why that happened and how we can stop it from happening again. That's my first question. My second question is, I'm also developing a game. In fact, I'm not really a gamer like that, so I don't really know the terms and all that, but it's based on my comic book, and that was what I liked about the idea. I worked with some Tunisian studio. It's actually a school, but they work on the game, and the game is ready. I don't know whether it's first player or whatever, but you can actually play and do one or two things there. So, but we are stuck now, so I don't know if anybody can advise me on what do you think we should do next. Because I don't know the pipeline and how these things are going.
Yeah.
That's not my two questions.
I'll start with the last one.
Okay, I can talk about the first one as in Korea. The people that were employed mostly were from UNN, the artists, which is where I went to. So I kind of know them personally when it didn't happen. So I feel it was mainly because someone invested in it and somehow they kind of found out the business doesn't give returns as much as the investment was.
Wow.
So to me, I feel in gaming, if there's a way we can try to research and try to find a way to make it profitable so that it's not as a form that each time a studio sets up, they just focus on pitching, trying to get funds. I'm like, do something and try to get into business and try to find ways you can make returns from your the investment you put in, and
Well,
then
sorry, just because, but how do you make returns? Really? Because everyone is playing the games for free. So I'm like, how do you make money? Really?
okay, there are ads, though the money gotten from ads not as that much. The other option is to do the in-app purchases. So for that to work, you have to create value. You have to create a game in a way that people would want to pay for it. Yeah. So that's where the research comes from, which you do the game and check the feedback and try to check the feedback based on what people that have played the game have said, and then you work for it. So to me, I feel the mistake they made was like, because outside the country they were like, they are making so much money in games that they just thought they could just do the same thing and it will work out. I feel you should do your research first. Do a test. Like now, what I'm doing now is just a test. Let me see the feedback I get, then I understand the sector better to know how I approach the next game I play.
Sorry if I may add to that. With the Korea story, because that story is quite very, very interesting with the way the first test set up, right? And also, it went back to the time that I started getting involved in this industry. First of all, where Korea got it wrong is that the people who backed it, right, they weren't just, they were foreign investors, right? One foreign investor and one local, right? Now, the two people who backed Korea at that time, none of them had an understanding of what game it was. None of them, right? As they say with everything, with a lot of things in entrepreneurship, and even with tech entrepreneurship, you learn as you go, right? So there was this urge in terms of pushing out content, right? Quick content, fast content, not sustaining any of the title. When I mean sustaining, in terms of marketing, in terms of building that social aspect and all that wasn't being, right? Build your social dynamics to it, build your marketing strategies around it, get your community engaged. Let that, for instance, of recent, and I say this, I follow a lot of investments into the gaming sector. There is this game I play, and maybe some people have played on Facebook, right? It's called Hero Wars. Now, the company who has built that, right, they only have about 4 or 5 titles ever. And they've been they've been on Facebook gaming room, right? But they were acquired, right? For about, I can't even remember, because you see those figures. Once you see a lot of figures, you tend to lose the numbers. So, but they were acquired because they had built. Hero Wars has been on that Facebook gaming room for about 4 or 5 days, but the community aspect to it, right? The engagement. I mean, if you play Hero Wars, they keep every season. Once it's Christmas, they brought out new content. I just checked this month. They brought out new content, right? Because it's a mobile and because it's online, right? So that engagement needs to happen. If you don't have that engagement happen around the game, and you're just churning out content, then you have too big to fail mentality, right? And if you're playing with investor money and investors are not patient, right? They want to see you bringing in the money. And again, if you don't have people who actually understand what gaming is, then it's like too many wrong decisions, right? Led to the failure of Korea. So that's it, really.
Okay. A second question.
Sorry, I didn't add to that. Sorry, I wasn't struggling. Because I have inside information. So
You used to work at Korea, right?
yeah. So I mean, everyone has a point, which is fine. But I mean, what we need to remember is it was 2012 then. Nobody had any idea what gaming was.
Nobody what?
Nobody had any idea what gaming was in Africa. Zero idea. So I mean, yes, they churned out content, but they churned out content, or the reason why they decided to churn out content was they wanted to see whether there was actually talent, right? So that was at least that was what they put towards that.
But they were doing, sorry, your back call is EJ, just trying the market and see this is what's
Well, so
just doing many things and see which one will stick.
So yeah, so I mean, I can even say that if any of you guys know the Angry Birds story, you know the Angry Birds were doing that till they got to was their 70-something game or so, and they didn't make any money, right? This was them trying out content because the gaming market is very, very, you don't really know which game will hit, right?
Honestly,
Sometimes,
I
right?
think that
So,
the Boolean model was still the best model.
yeah.
It's still
So
the best model. It is still the best model. The reason why they failed were a couple of things. So one of them is platform. They were doing web at the time. Mobile wasn't defined. You know, don't forget that back then there was Nokia, there was BlackBerry, there was Windows, there was Android, there was iOS. You know, like I'm sure there was a few more that were creeping about. But like back then, you had to decide on which platform to build for. You couldn't really build the same way you can build now. So that's the very first thing. So if they had all of those titles for mobile, they would probably stand a much better chance now than they did back then just because of the platform. I think that approach of like build plenty still works, and that is something that we are still trying to do. Like literally have a portfolio of like 100 content, different genres, right? But I think the missing piece is this idea around systems. Because all of those games with the right systems built into them will achieve the same end goal, right? Because the core gameplay, we all saw that was also, okay, you tried this one, you're not too big fan. You tried that one, you're not a big fan. But the core game systems are all the same, right?
I think that they didn't really put too much thought on the story side of them.
No, you don't have to. Stories, you don't need to. Stories make sense for like big games. For kind of like the casual and the hyper casual space, story's not as important. You know, a good example with Downfall Racer, we built a story around Downfall Racer. A very beautiful story. Pages and pages and pages long. When we got into it, it's a racing game. It didn't need the story. It's a racing game. You're driving around streets. It's Lagos, Downfall Boss. No story required, right? So the story guy, great work, we'll put out the archives, but I don't see how it's going to fit into the game. We don't need characters. We don't need all these characters. We don't need all these bus stops. We don't need all of these things. Honestly, we don't need them, right? Because the player is just playing the racing game, right? So with something like Downfall Racer, for instance, with the right systems, you can build different types of Downfall Racers. You can build one Matatu Racer. You can build for every single continent, right? The core game is still there. The core system is still there. You can replicate it for multiple. So you can get 5 games out of 1, which is what the big guys are doing.
Okay.
The second question around your game that you guys are working on, what you guys should do? Playtest. Playtest.
Okay. What do you by playtest?
Playtest. Get people to play a game and give you feedback. It's literally that simple. Get people.
You have to put it on the game.
No, you don't have to. Send, you know, like you can 10 people.
Okay.
10 people that you know.
Okay.
Guy, here's my game. Please install. It's Android, right? Install. When you finish, here's the link. Complete feedback. Let me know when you've played it. Get back to the person. Did you play? What, you know, sometimes even the first time user experience is the problem. Like when I get into the game, I don't know what to do. Like that is already a problem. You get that feedback. Maybe you knew it, but you're not trying to accept that it is. So you now have to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. With built games, sometimes you can also have caveats. You can say, okay, fine, the game does not have tutorial right now. These are the features that are missing. I actually want you to focus on this particular part, right? These are the things that you need to do. You can even write out the first time user experience. When you go in step 1, open this, go to this page, step 2, add 3, step 3, move this one to here, step 4, come back and go here. You can literally write out your player tutorial, like just write it out, the 5-10 steps that they need to go. By the time they complete all of those steps, they know what to do in the game.
So I think
Sorry,
next,
hold on, question
next
to that.
session.
Just to add to that, what sort of game are you building for? What platform are you building?
I don't know, but I think they're using Unity.
No, in terms of platform, are you building for mobile? Are you building for PC? Are you building for console?
I would love to ask those questions, but it's a new space for me. You know, I've been in animation, but I'm just trying to explore the gaming. So maybe I would reach out to you guys maybe after this session and then probably pick your brains on. And never interested in taking it off my hands.
You're on your own.
Alright, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.